Well, welcome to the Leadership Lounge. It's great to have you here with us again this month. I would just want to welcome Alex Menhams, who's a trainer, speaker, and improviser who runs the Here and Now People improvisation community. So we're really pleased that you're here with us, Alex. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I've asked Alex to come and join us this month because I want us to explore the power of improvisation can have for us in leadership and in life. Quite often we're taught to evaluate, strategise and plan and all get our life sorted. And this can be really important for us. However, life and leadership doesn't work out like that. And it doesn't always go to plan, and the unexpected can happen. So Alex will have something fresh, a new perspective to bring for us that might help us in those unexpected moments, because our topic this month is to look at navigating the unexpected. So Alex, great to have you here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
So, Alex, I know a little bit about you. I've just introduced you with your, your heading there in what you do. But tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, so our listeners who perhaps don't know you can find out a little bit about you.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So I have been, I guess, for the last 15 years, I've been freelance, solo, and always working I kind of think of it as people-powered change. So helping people to get the change they want. So I often work as a facilitator, so running workshops, working with leadership groups, boards, running conferences, all sorts of different things where people are working with information and ideas and coming to decisions. So that's quite a big part of my work. The other side is around training, so learning and development. How do people to help people get the skills, grow the skills, the mindset that helps them to be better leaders, better teammates, better listeners, all those kind of things. So, and then I also run an improv community called Here and Now People, and we have classes every week in Woodbridge in Suffolk, and we put on shows, and I also perform improv. So this summer I was in Germany and Nottingham at improv festivals, performing with colleagues. So yeah, all those kind of things, and I guess there's a through line in that around creativity, self-expression, clear thinking as well. Like, how do we have a good strategy, and then a strategy for how we actually make it happen? Which for me, improv, plays into that a lot, because you can have a plan, but the reality is consistently kind of calls on you to adapt and modify to either fulfill the plan or to change the plan, right?
Yeah.
So
So for many people, they may have heard of improvisation, and I guess it's something we learn in life. I'm in this situation right where, so I need to improvise. I hadn't planned for this. And then there's the shortened version of improv. And so some people may have heard of some plays in London where it's improv, but perhaps don't really know what it's all about. So what is improvisation or improv? Can we help the listeners sort of understand what it is in essence?
Yeah, I can try for sure.
In a few short sentences.
In a snappy way. So it's kind of different ways into it. So it's a human skill, for one. It's either sometimes seen as a peak human skill. So when you're in flow, you will be improvising from one moment to the next. Each action and your awareness kind of combine. You're operating at your peak. But it's also seen as the last resort of the unprepared amateur, what to do when things really go wrong. So as a human skill, it's kind of, survival or thriving. It plays at the edges there, but we do it every day. So that's maybe improvisation as a skill set. But then improv, really is it could be improvised theatre or improvised comedy. So there are things people may know, like Whose Line Is It Anyway? Is a great example. We've been on the TV. There are also touring companies that come around to the different theatres. There's Showstopper the musical, so a whole improvised musical in different genres. Amazing, with a story behind it, and it's fantastic. It's amazing what people can do. And then you've got, I guess, like another tier down, which I think I belong in, which is where I perform at local pubs, different venues, at festivals and things like that. And so, what we're essentially doing is spontaneous theatre. So instead of having a script, we have practiced all the different skills we need and built the trust and learn how to work together so that we don't actually need a script. We can respond from each other. So that's, like improvisation and then improv. But there's a kind of another key piece, which is that, so in many ways, like the training I do is applied theatre. Improv is the specific bit that I bring it from. But back in, I think it was Chicago. Yeah, Chicago in the 1920s, there was someone called Viola Spolin. And she worked with people that had come to the States from other countries. English wasn't their first language. They maybe even didn't speak English. And she started using theatre games to help them to connect, to become more confident, to be more present in the moment with each other. And gradually she started to distill, what are the exercises that help people to cooperate, collaborate, communicate? All begin with C, all the different things.
Love that.
Yeah, I could do more of them as well. And so, and then she developed that. That turned into Second City, which is a major comedy thing. Saturday Night Live comes out of Second City. They still run educational things. So there's a rich history of using, because all it is really is saying, human interaction, let's put a little box around it and play, and then see what happens. So whether you're doing that for performance or for learning, or even a lot of people come to my classes week by week, they don't really want to perform. They just want to experience it and have fun and kind of, like play a bit more than is usually the case.
So thank you for that. I think it's given us an understanding that improvisation actually sits at the heart of us as humans. And I love the way you said it's both a survival, but it's also this higher end skill as well. So I think certainly in my reading and research and stuff we've covered in the past on our podcast as well, that basic emotional function of survival that we have, that means if there's a threat, what do I do, and how do I manage this? How do I improvise to keep myself safe? So you're right about that primal function. And then you talked about actually sometimes as a group of people, where you talked about it in your theatre context, we've learned all sorts of different experiences. That means we can be dexterous in any one moment because we've got things we pull upon. And you've talked about the Csikszentmihalyi stuff around flow, and that sense that in flow we pull in that instant, don't we, of all those little experiences we've had and trust in those. So you're right, it's a blend of both the survival but also that higher order skill. And then you also use it in the context of theatre and fun as you've described. So I wonder if we could dig a little bit deeper on that. In fact, I've got a little phrase here that you, in our discussions in preparation for the podcast, you said, I see improv as a front foot choice that makes amazing things happen. And I love that phrase.
Okay.
I thought, I want to flesh that out a bit with you. So how is improv a front foot choice that makes amazing things happen? Tell us a bit more.
Okay. So actually, I think in a way, I can track it back to flow and Csikszentmihalyi. So one of his sort of modern day people that really bring flow to life, Stephen Kotler, if you come across him, he's very good. He talks about flow, that kind of peak performance in the moment. Is typically, it shows up when often when there's a scarcity of resources and we're heading towards conflict. So how do you kind of operate at your peak in order to survive? But the same mechanism is available when we want to actually create new resources or achieve things that have not yet been done before to make resources. So in a way, it's kind of the art of flow, both in terms of personal presence, so how do I show up in this moment, but also as a group, how do we find flow together? And there's another person called Keith Sawyer, sorry, lots of different names, but he's got a book.
People can follow this up and check it out afterwards, can't they?
Yeah, he's got a book called Group Genius. And between them, they've decoded a lot of the key principles or ways of working that enable you to get flow versus resistance, rejection, blocking each other. So I look often to, so if our listeners or viewers have never seen an improvised performance, you can see them on Netflix. So Middleditch and Schwartz are a fantastic show on Netflix. There's only 3 episodes they ever filmed in a theatre, but you'll see 2 people improvising. So don't take my word for it, look it up, see what people can do. Or go and see some of the big touring companies that go around the UK, or go see your local group. Most towns in the UK have it now. So I think that when you learn how to improvise, it becomes, for me, it's a first choice. So I'll try and just stay calm and listening And I can talk you through in a second just some core principles, and there are different versions of the principles. But if you use them, it becomes your first choice to actually live out your values and move towards your goals. So I guess often in groups, if I've only got a short amount of time, the most distilled version I would use is, so improv is listen, say yes and commit. It's a version of the improv
So just run through that again so our listeners can embed that.
Yeah, so listen, say yes and commit, and I'll talk you through them, right?
Yeah, let's improvise.
Yeah.
We do have a bit of a script when we have a series of questions, sorry, but let's improvise. Let's go down that line. I think it's going to be really helpful for listeners to understand that.
Okay, great. Yeah, grand. So because I think this is what enables it to become a front foot choice in answer to your question. So, and behind that, what we're doing, we're thinking there's an idea of offers. So people are constantly making offers to each other. So I'm just going to pause on this for a moment and then explain my kind of other thing. So in any given moment, you are either making an offer. So that could be your thoughts that you're sharing, an idea. It might be feelings that you're sharing. It could be non-verbal. So you might be sharing an offer like you are now, of looking at me in a kind of like I'm listening kind of way. But you could be giving me an offer of, looking away, and I'll be like, oh, you're telling me something different. So in every moment, there are offers galore coming from other people, from ourselves. What do I think and feel? Am I acting upon it? And even the wider world. So there's a question of, we're making offers? Are we accepting offers? So we actually take it and value it and use it, or are we blocking offers? Are we actually unhelpfully, resisting and rejecting what other people are offering us? So if you boil it back down to, listen is really notice, keep observing, stay present, what's available to you. And listen is not just, auditory, it's notice is probably a wider word.
I was picking up as you were saying that, because when we're truly and deeply listening to someone, it isn't just what we're hearing, it's what we're seeing, the non-verbal clues, isn't it, in people's body language, their movement. Great. So it's noticing and listening. And is that to pick up what's on offer? Yeah,
exactly. Offers is a useful, it's quite an improv-y word, but it's a useful language, I think, if you just, take off the parallel world of improv. What offers are people making to you, and are you making to them? And also, what offers are they not making, and why? Could be quite interesting as well. So then you come to, well, are you accepting or are you blocking? So it's, quite easy in a sense to block. And a lot of the training I do, people are unaware that they're blocking, either by ignoring. So someone, you just put it into a conversation. Someone says something, you'd spot an improviser in that they take what has been said, and the thing they say will very likely link to it quite clearly. They've heard what's been said. They might repeat back some of it, as you did to me earlier. They'll then build on it, build with it, and their response then becomes a dialogue. And it's very different to two monologues, that are just intersecting. It's a dialogue. So that bit around yes and, which we could talk in depth about, but I won't go too deep here, is trying to find what you can say yes to in what the other person's offering you. And then the and is valuing it, using it, building on it or building with it. And that's a real art. That isn't just a kind of, let's all say yes, everything's a yes. That isn't the real world. But if we can find what we can say yes to, and then find what we can contribute to support that, and when we do that for each other, that's when improv really flows. So that's where you get to the flow. And that is all you're really seeing. When you see it on stage, there are different parts to it, but at the core of it, people are making offers, others are saying yes to them, and it might be they're saying yes to part of the offer, the bit that they can value and use, and then they're adding their own. And by that process, you get a lot of agency. Each person is bringing what they can. So, yeah.
So if we were to take what you've just said into a real life context that we might find ourselves in, either in life or in leadership, you said about listen and notice. So you might be in a meeting with someone and you just notice they don't seem quite themselves, so that's listening. And maybe they just drop in, I've had a terrible morning. So that's the listening and the noticing. What you offer, and you talked about that, finding connection. So someone might then return that with saying, you've had a terrible morning, so you might reflect back the language they've used.
Yep.
What does that mean for you?
Yep. Yeah.
So that's the connecting bit, is it?
Absolutely.
And then there was the yes and. So how would the yes and fit in a context like that?
Yeah. So I think you just did it basically.
Okay.
So
which aspect of that was the yes and?
Yeah. So the onward bit, the build. So you played back the so you're not feeling good. Tell me about that. What's going on? So it's just a question in this case. Like you've prompted the next thing. You've added a question. I'd like to know more.
Okay.
You probably would add an offer of, do you lean in?
Yeah.
Do you get eye contact? Rather than, you're not well.
Rather than moving on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not.
Did you see the football last night and completely ignoring it?
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, right. Anyway, onto the agenda. Right. So that is a yes and that you just did.
Okay, but it's more of a rejection, is it? So what I did was the yes and.
Yeah.
But if the person says, "Oh, really? Right. Next item on our agenda."
Yeah.
Is that what you would say is the rejection of the offer?
I think so. Yeah. So you in training, I often play with different things like saying no and seeing how productive a conversation you can have with one party saying no. Spoiler alert, not very productive.
Yes.
Then we do yeah, but. So you could say something and then I would say yeah, but, and I'll find a reason to criticise and kill it. And again, we are disconnecting. And it may look like we're having a critical dialogue, but we're not actually connecting and making progress. The yes and would be then it's a kind of forcing you to accept and use and value other people's contributions.
Yeah. So it sounds to me that word yes and I often is quite key. I often talk about this in coaching where I say to people, try not to use the word but.
Yeah.
If we use the word and instead, which might not be the right connective in the sentence, but it's about adding rather than rejecting and moving on from. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And some people find it hard. So in training, some people, you can see them working really hard. It's not their natural thing to actually fully take what someone's offered them and then be like, okay, pause a moment, let it in, let it matter, and then respond to it. It's not the natural go-to for quite a lot of people.
Yeah. So if it's not the natural go-to, how do we allow improvisation to flourish? And I'm not talking here just within your theatre sense, but in terms of our everyday working as human beings or as leaders. How do we create a thing where those three key components you've just talked about and around that listening and around noticing and the yes and aspect to that, how do we create spaces that enable that to flourish?
Yeah. So I think partly what we've been doing so far is talking about the language of improvisation. So I think that's one thing which is useful in and of itself, talking about offers and accepting blocking, and also, so that's one thing. But what lies behind that then is, well, what kind of culture do we want? So, a lot of my work is around, creating experiences that just shift culture, which is, it's a slow thing, but you can have occasions that do it significantly. And that culture really is, I track it back to, if you think about a professional improv team on stage, they have culture. So they're rehearsing quite a lot, practicing those key skills, and natural, like becoming a default yes-ander takes quite a lot of practice. And even with different people, so some people you find it easy. You easily fall into a yes-anding kind of relationship. Others, it's hard work, right? They know but you and or whatever, So what it takes to flourish, I think, is the culture around it. So that really is kind of, I guess, I'm only pausing because it takes a bit of time, in all honesty. So I tend to go into places and work where the culture is already tilting towards people valuing. So how can we have more diversity and like radical levels of inclusion? We want everyone's contribution to be seen and heard and used. We do want creativity and innovation, and we are willing, in fact, to let go of some traditions and conventions, not the classic. We want innovation, but we don't want anything to change. So it's really a case of you need a culture around it that makes, like on the cognitive side, an idea-friendly environment, and on the other side, one which is quite open, like a whole, where people's feelings are welcome. And that doesn't mean you have to get all super touchy-feely, but it does mean that you're there, like actually working from feelings. How do we feel about this? Can we have an honest conversation? So, yeah, I think what it takes to flourish is, there's some sort of getting the conditions for it.
And so I'm hearing, in order for you to create a space where there's inclusion and contribution and feelings can be expressed, it's about creating a space that feels safe for people. And I'm guessing that's the case in your theatre groups as much as it is in a workplace. And you're on that journey of trying to create safe space to allow the improvisation to flourish. We'll flesh this one out a bit more as we go through our session together today, but I guess I want at this stage to help our listeners is just to say, almost ask the question, and this is me improvising because it wasn't on our original list of questions we thought we might explore, of what is the point and the power of improvisation? Why should our listeners and watchers be considering improvisation as something as important in life and in leadership?
Yeah.
What's the point? What's the power of it? Why should we be creating a safe space for improvisation?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Got so many different thoughts. First, I think actually, so recently I did a session I attended as I was being trained, and the person reframed safe space as a space for acceptable risk, which I found really interesting, because what they were saying was, I don't actually know what's safe for you. I could ask you to get up and perform with me, as I might do in training, and you might be, I feel really exposed here in front of this group. I don't feel safe for that. But if you frame it as acceptable risk and you get volunteers, then actually you're changing the nature of like what people can contribute. So I think what improvisation does I guess I'm thinking of it as a training method here, but something that people can do on their own, it gradually raises the level of acceptable risk, really. And that includes for whether you're in a team discussion. Some people don't volunteer a lot, so I facilitate a lot of sessions for a living. And as hard as I might try, can we hear from someone who hasn't spoken yet? Is anyone who hasn't added their voice to this yet that we'd like to hear from? Even cold calling people, like, I notice you haven't contributed for a while. Yeah. Would you be willing to share your thoughts or feelings on this? Some people aren't that willing to share. So the power of it is really partly like just lowering the bar. So it's playful and it's oblique. So it isn't role play. People often think, I don't want to do role play. I feel exposed. Whereas it's oblique. So we do things like a word at a time story, or a yes and story, where I'll coach from the sides. Like, hang on a minute, did you block there? Okay, what would happen if you accepted? Getting the flow to work. So when people kind of dig into it, it does two things. It allows a permission for more playfulness, more curiosity, and it gives people cat cop it. So she's one of my favourite applied improvisation people, and that's Kat Koppett, Koppet. She says, improv is the gym, and it's the gym for all those soft skills, and they're often the hard part, right? We can talk about them, we can read about them, but you need to do the reps. So that's what improv offers. And the good news is, while you're doing the reps, you're getting better at listening, connecting. Yeah. You're also having fun.
So I can see within coming along to one of your classes, joining your theatre group, it, as you say, exposes you to things in a safe space, a supportive space that allows you to develop some of those soft skills. In terms of in the workplace and that willingness to improvise, and as we say, we're going to go into this a bit deeper as to what that looks like and how it assists you, but what is it that if we allow ourselves and those that we work with to feel more comfortable to improvise in moments, what will it bring us?
Yeah, so I think to go back to your example of, so say you've got a one-to-one, you're on Zoom, you drop in, you've got an hour, say you've got a bunch of stuff you both want to cover, the other person shows up and they've just had an altercation and they are dealing with that, processing it. Yeah. So do you accept their offer and do you meet them where they are and say, tell me more, or, how did that make you feel? And you just and play back, and we'll just question a bit. Coaching, the coaching style is often improvisational because you're tracking with them. And then at a certain point, when it's the right time, you can start tracking back to, would you be okay if we move to our agenda now? Which is fine, right? Yeah. But having done so, you have met as humans and it's authentic. Yes. And there's a real power in that, because to do otherwise, it just even a thing like that, to say, oh, you'll be all right, agenda now, is to dismiss really the person and their emotional world. So that and many other things, it's treating life as a full contact sport where you don't just wriggle off the hook because it's uncomfortable. You try and stay there and you try and stay with whatever's happening. And that's really powerful, because as leaders, it can be, here's a decision I made and said, ultimately, let's go in this direction. And I'm now seeing that there were other voices that I could have listened to. We could have had a different strategy or done planned it somewhat differently. If it's not working, are you paying attention to the results? So
I love your example there. Actually, I think that's a really powerful example, because from what you said earlier, when you said you would coach people within the theatre group, hang on, let's press stop. What if we offered the different one? And so you've given the really good improvised thing of saying, right, the plan was for this agendaed meeting. I sense that actually you're not in the right place for this agendaed meeting, so I'm going to give you some authentic connection to help you process before we move back to the agenda. If, of course, the person had, instead of going yes and, had gone yes, but we're now going on to our agenda, the chances are there wouldn't have been the full engagement in the agenda anyway. They're still distracted. So the power of improvisation in that moment is authentic connection that then allows you to work to the agenda at the right time. If you choose not to improvise in that moment, you risk that you'll never get proper connection with the agenda anyway. So there's the power of improvisation, as you said, that deep human connection that allows the strategy, the schedule, whatever we're going to call it at that point, to still work. It might be delayed, but it gets a more authentic connection with you and a more authentic connection with the agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And there's another one as well on top of that, which is so like deep human connection, absolutely. And there's another kind of tilt on that, which is, could get quite profound here, but in some ways, being willing to improvise is to have a shared experience of human fallibility. So when my colleagues and I, we go and perform, we don't know if we're going to, what we'll create an event is going to work. We've got a paying audience. So we're very fallible. So we really have to support each other, and we know that. So take it into a workplace context. I've spent, best part of 10 or 15 years doing training in critical thinking and creative thinking. And I've seen so many sessions where one or two people are willing to share, like they'll share an idea, a half-formed thought. They'll say, oh, I could build on that, and what if it did this? And effectively, there are so many blind alleys in any creative pursuit. Being willing to follow them and share things as they come is an ability that improvisers have, because it's Miles Davis, improviser, jazz musician, said, it's not the note you play that is wrong, it's the note afterwards that tells you whether it was right or wrong. So how good you are at playing that next note means you can support each other and move. And even if you're ultimately saying, yes, that is a great idea, we could, I haven't got an example to mind right now, but if you say yes, and if we did this, it would make it even better. So you're able to get movement and flow. So, but typically we are really bad at creativity. You need things that are both novel and useful, but we're terrible at novelty. Adults are, kids are amazing at novelty, right? 6 impossible things before breakfast. As adults, we get so conditioned to useful. Make it useful, make it quick. And actually, these little creative detours and excursions where you can pick up a whole new thing. All of our processes and resources are lined up in the wrong market, in an inefficient way. You can just get the insights that you get from stepping out a bit. So it's a real skill set for that.
And I'm hearing there a real sense of when we work with people that are yes and, as you say, if you've put forward an idea that isn't fully formed and isn't necessarily going to work, but the next person builds on that with a yes and, the note, as you've just used, that builds on maybe the wrong note, but allows that wrong note, then that wrong idea to become something really good. So there's real power. That leads us really nicely back into where our questions might have been going anyway, around how we perform well as a team, so high-performing teams. You know, if you were here as we are in my office, you'll see my bookcase, lots on there on how you plan for high-performing teams. We've just begun to touch there on actually what a high-performing team can be like in terms of improvisation. So just tell us a little bit more about what role improvisation can do to really move us from being a standard team to a high-performing team. Okay.
So, because I saw it on your bookshelf just now, I'm a big fan of Patrick Lencioni.
Yeah.
So his model of a functional or dysfunctional team.
Yeah.
Maybe we could use that here as a thing that we could use. So his model is a pyramid, and there are 5 stages to it, and you have to be able to have each stage working well to be able to activate the next stage. It's building foundations up to the roof. So you have, well, to keep it in simple terms, the need for trust.
Yeah, that's his core one, isn't it? He said, actually, you can have all the rest, but if you haven't got trust as the seed bed, you're in trouble.
Nothing else will follow. And then if you have trust, you can have, I call it productive debate. So you can have conflict, is how he calls it. But I prefer thinking it like we can have a robust exchange of views, ideas, feelings, strategies, anything, because we're working towards the selection of the best of those in our shared interest. So you've got to have trust to have that debate. And then if you've had that debate and you've opened it as much as you can, when it comes to decisions, you've got the maximum level of commitment. It's like, okay, well, we had it out. It wasn't quite my plan, perhaps, but we're going to go with it because enough of us have said that's what we think is our best for now, best decision. The model goes on from there. I think the first 3 are probably enough. And just remind me of your question. High-performing teams.
And it's how improv can help.
So the first one, the trust one, vulnerability is a huge part of that. The willingness to be vulnerable. So improv exercises. So my job is to get people. So if they hear it's we're having an improv training day, and it's the training day, and it's going to be improv. People are a bit kind of like, I could be exposed here. I might be made to look silly or foolish or embarrassed. So my job is to get people off that high wire. But it's interesting, right? We're only in a room, only playing some games. What is that? What makes that feel so full of sweaty fingers? And so I'll often say that actually it's a fear of social death, right? It strikes to a really deep place.
Yes.
And if you're, you perform badly enough and you're rejected by the group, you're out of the cave, you're ostracised.
So it's a core function about being part of the pack, isn't it? And I don't want to be excluded from the pack. It's a primal need of ours.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but by wanting to be part of the pack, sometimes we keep tucked in at the back of the pack, right? Keep your head down, don't speak up, don't share too much. And then we don't have the full diversity and range of offers. People that are introvert or very sensitive, we'll be seeing things and hearing things that could totally transform our strategy or operations, but we're not getting it quite often. So in that high-performing team, there are exercises you can do, improv or otherwise, to be honest, but they're in the moment and they're experiential that will build that trust. So I'll give you just an example. So, because I mentioned it earlier, we do word at a time story. So you get one word, I get one word. We could do it if you like.
Yeah, let's go. I've done this exercise with you on a training session, and it was really interesting. So, let's go.
Okay, I'll set it up. So let's do this as a shared anecdote. So it's an experience that we've both had, albeit it's imaginary, and we'll start with the words. Do you want to start or shall I?
You can start.
I'll start. So one day we went. First 4 words are down. So one day we went, and from there we'll carry on. If you get to the end of a sentence, if you want, you can say full stop, and then say the next word, and we'll carry on. And what we'll see here, the thing to pay attention to is making offers, and whether we're accepting each other's offers, or whether we are in some ways blocking them for whatever reasons. Should we do that?
Mm-hmm. We'll give it a go.
All right. So, one
day
we
went
to
a
bakery.
where
We
found
a
giant
loaf
of
bread
which
was
flavoured
by
a
artisan
smell.
The
Smell
was
wafting
under
the
window.
and
I
found
myself
wandering.
inside.
I
Asked
if
I
could
have
one
of
the
mushroomy
loaves.
and
The
baker
said
no.
I
Pleaded
with
him.
but
He
said
absolutely.
not.
They
Still
sell
many
other
types
of
bread.
the end.
Because we could go on for quite
We
some
could
time.
go on. Yeah, exactly. So what did you notice in terms of sort of making offers, accepting, blocking, those kind of
I
things?
think our listeners won't have noticed this, but our watchers may have noticed there's some non-verbal clues where we were almost looking into each other's eyes and going, where are we going with this? And possibly some slight tone and inflection on the word, which may have led the other person to think where we might think the story is going.
Yeah.
But then sometimes the person then didn't respond in the way that I thought you might have responded.
Yeah.
And so, oh, okay, so we're taking a different route.
Yeah.
And you're trying to then make sense of the words that the person is giving you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and another name for this is control freak's nightmare. Because you just don't know, do you? Like, one day we went to this is a key word. What's it going to be? Zoo often comes up.
Yeah.
Bakery.
Yeah.
But it could have been, I don't know, camera factory or whatever. But those are key ones where, so this is, for example, are you willing at that moment to make an offer? So some people I see, one day we went to the place where people, and it's vague, you kind of wimped out. But for some people it's really hard to give those like keywords. There's a really specific thing, it's going to change everything. Am I willing to give it? And then, so other people will have the thing where they, I might get the kind of jokey peacock in the group that they want up and they're going to demo it, and they don't listen at all. So their words don't even fit the pattern, or they say 2 or 3 words at the same time. Or when it comes to them just to say, we went to, and they're on the 2 word, they're like, I don't want to. So they go, one day we went zoo. And you're like, oh, hang on a minute. So we get into all these rich conversations because it's oblique and it's on the side of what is normally done, where we get to see patterns. And like, are you willing to show up and contribute? Like, and behind that, what values drive you to express yourself, to share for the benefit of the group, or even for the benefit of the group, do you still hold back? So in terms of high performance, these are the little things that we all get these patterns. Like, we know the person who, despite being able to take their car apart at the weekend, doesn't know how to turn on the dishwasher in the kitchen of the shared office. Oh no, I don't know which buttons to press. Oh really? Right? Just as a for example. And we fall into these patterns where we give each other accommodations and affordances, and oh, they won't do that. Oh no, there's no way. When I get involved, I slowly bring those to life in a way where people are not exposed, and we're talking often in general terms, but then also there's an opportunity to try different, to notice that, like, you'll find out, am I a good listener? If a sentence is as long as your arm, do I listen down to the bottom of the shoulder here, to the elbow, all the way to the wrist, to the very fingertips for every bit of information? Or by the time you've got to my kind of, bicep, I'm like, great, I know what I'm going to say next. And then you're in your head thinking. All those things, they can come out of the wash just by taking a step into a little parallel track where all of human life is kind of there, and yet we're just away from the coalface. So yeah, and that leads to high performance, because you get to iron out issues and habits, and those soft skills are the hard part very often. And we find it really hard to say to people, it doesn't even work. By the way, you're a terrible listener and you really need to work on it. What reaction is that going to get?
Yeah, it makes
hard,
you,
right?
yeah.
But with a bit of movement and hopefully a bit of kind of art, these things can come to life and people then can work on it. Yeah.
And what I'm picking up from both that exercise and from what you're talking about there is the real power of the yes and bit. And when you talked earlier about as a improv group, how you look out for each other to build on.
Yeah.
Because even that exercise, we were building on, weren't we?
Yeah.
So improvisation and giving those opportunities in moments for people to explore allows you to build on.
Yeah.
And that can help you to then increase your performance. Team building, as you say, on some of those first three bits around Lencioni, building the trust with each other and that commitment towards the end goal. Well, this is where we want to get to. In this case, we wanted to create a short story.
Yeah.
We need to work together on this, but trust each other for the next word.
Yeah.
But also a sense of going with the flow of what each person offers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I maybe you can also bring in the second bit of Lencioni around. So did we have productive debate there? Because we were actually both sort of steering it in our own ways. Now you can overdo this, right? Because it was a made-up story in the moment.
Yeah.
But so just as an example, I thought we were going to name the flavour or the smell earlier. I thought it was just going to come. And by happenstance, it didn't. It ended up being a generic smell, wafting under a window, right? Yeah. So there was a moment when I thought, because improv needs specifics, human communication needs the specifics, I dropped in mushroomy, right? And I did it in a way that was, and you were like, oh, we're going there, are we? Right? But actually we kind of, so we're both steering it. It's kind of often not seen, but yes and is a steering device. A bit like sailing into the wind, you tack. So yeah, we're doing that, and then I guess we had commitment to results in that we persevered, right? We just kept going.
Yeah, like, even if some of it ended up a bit wobbly and dodgy.
Yeah, and it definitely started wobbling quite a bit at the end. If we'd carried on, it might have got back to smooth ground.
Again.
Yeah, we'd have found out, why was he being such a difficult baker, right?
Absolutely.
No, neither we nor the audience know,
and we didn't know in the beginning we were going to have a difficult baker.
No, we didn't.
Absolutely.
No.
Let's. It's interesting. A number of the bits we've talked about there are this sense of being truly present and listening. And so, I wonder if we just say briefly a little bit more on how improv helps you to be truly present and listening in that moment then.
Yeah. Well, I think it, probably more than anything, it again and again demonstrates to you the need to be present and to listen. I'm trying to think which way to go with this. I do a training exercise where we do you tell me your life story in a minute, and then I play it back to you. And we do it a few times over, we repeat this, and people often find that at a certain point, I'd hear you say the first few things. This is where I was born, this is who I am, and if I start noting to myself, okay, he said this, he said that, don't forget, all right, got that. All the while I'm doing that, I miss. I miss everything you say next. So, and when you get to repeat it back, some people have got like, okay, I can repeat the whole minute, and typically it's because they stayed relaxed, stayed,
They stayed in the story.
Stayed in the story.
They've connected their brain patterning to your brain patterning, and so therefore it resonates.
Yeah, in a way they're doing the minimum. They're not working too hard internally. Or not gesturing too much, I'm communicating lots back to you, and I'm distracted by that. So that you learn to just stay present and listen. And we constantly get pulled out into thoughts about the future, thoughts about the past, thoughts about ourselves, thoughts about the other person. Like there are pulls aplenty, and I think it teaches you the need to stay in that present bit, but also then the virtue of it. Yeah, I think that's kind of it.
And the sense then that when we stay in the moment, we truly listen, we're building authentic connection. Authentic connection builds deep relationship. deep relationship then allows us to build trust. Trust then allows us to build team.
Yeah.
And then the cycle continues.
Yeah.
So that's the power of being present in the moment, which is what improv is in theatrical terms, and how that can work through.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I think you can track it, all of that, definitely. There's another possible bit, which is about resourcefulness. So we never lack for resources. As my kids, I tell my kids this and they get bored of it, but you never lack for resources, only for resourcefulness, right? How can you be full of resources? And so the more you can actually sort of, it's a kind of detached, it's a full engagement with a detached awareness. How can you be listening enough to notice what are the small offers that people are making, that how do you amplify, the useful things that are there, or and I think we tend to miss that if we're too busy rushing. Like, I don't know, take a DIY project, for example. That's often improvised in my house, right? I don't quite know what I'm doing or how or which tool. I'll get there in the end. So along the way, are you noticing when someone suggests, well, what about this? Or, or someone offers you a tool you could borrow, or suggests a completely different way of doing it. If you're being pulled too far to the plan, the future, the past, all these things, you'll miss it again and again. And the improv stage is an interesting kind of crucible for that, because if someone comes on to join a story and they've not been listening, it's going to be really crunchy, right? And we'll do our best to kind of like blend that in and weave that in. So but it also, the other thing is that it just feels good, right? To be present is to listen is to be present. They help each other. And at the more profound level, like, you can never be anywhere but here and now. Like, you can't say that the moment is going to be at 1:30, or are we going to be now at 1:45 the hour? It's only ever this moment, right?
Hence why your company is called Here and Now.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So our topic today is navigating the unexpected, which improv is full of. But one of the things that I think's going to be helpful to listeners is, as leaders, we plan things. Now, our listeners may have heard the infamous line, the best laid plans of mice and men oft go awry. I mean, probably they only hear the first bit, the best laid plans of mice and men, which signifies, well, I planned this, but it's gone wrong. It's from the poem To a Mouse by Robert Burns, where the mouse had made this great plan, but now the farmer's come and harvested and wrecked his house. He had great plans for it. So we often build strategies, we have plans, but sometimes things don't go to plan. And so, we get perhaps a series of unfortunate events that happen. We often hear that called the perfect storm, where a whole series of unexpected comes together, and we're just in this moment of, that's either volatile or it's uncertain or it's really complex. We didn't know it was going to be like this, or there's a sense of ambiguity. So that's shortened quite often down to sort of VUCA, this uncertainty in this moment. How might the principles of improv help us navigate these kind of unexpected moments, whether they're small unexpected or big unexpected? How does the principles behind that help us?
Yeah, okay. There's a number of different ways, really. So acceptance is... Actually, I'm going to start in the other place. So there's an idea that improvisation is where strategy and execution meet. So it's like Eisenhower said, planning is essential, but plans are useless. So that constant process of scanning, observing, tuning in, predicting a little way ahead, huge value. And we have we have important things to do, don't we? Often, I work with a lot of charities that are serving people who really need their help. So you can't just abandon the strategy and just go, oh, well, let's leave it then. So it's a long way from that. It's saying, well, actually, how do we notice the offers that are available to us from ourselves or others or the world that can actually help us move from where we are towards what we're trying to do? So there's one view on it, which I take is, well, have we invested in the capacity, the ability for intentional adaptation in our people, which is, you could say improv is that intentional adaptation. Are we good at this? Because if you're a leader who's in the hot seat, series of unfortunate events. And if you're really good at improvising, but your team are not, change will be harder and slower.
Yeah.
They'll not be looking for those offers. And if you don't have that either, then you're going to be more rigidly revert to the plan, back to the numbers. I've been in all sorts of, squirreling bits of budget away and changing figures that, appear to make things work, but they don't, do they? So, yeah, how do you and your team improvise? But for you yourself, I think you can boil it down to offers. What can I use? A definition of an offer is something you can use. So it's kind of disappointingly short description, really. But what can you use to work towards your goals? So just being more present to notice that.
Yeah.
Really.
So I'm picking up two important aspects, and one I don't want to miss, which is about being intentional in preparing your team before these moments come to create space to explore how you can be dexterous in those moments as part of that process. So I think that's one important thing you're drawing out. And then just, what can I use in this moment? Yeah. So that's almost a key question. If you find yourself in this uncertain moment, unexpected, okay, what's around me? Yeah. So I'm almost reminded there as when my children were younger, every Sunday night we would sit down and watch Scrap Heap Challenge.
Okay.
And great program, a couple of teams in a scrap heap, they were given a task of build a car that can do this, or build a machine that can do this, and they had to go around the scrap heap and find the things in that moment to create this machine. They just knew the outline, and they were just saying, right, what around me can I use in this moment? So that's the sort of visual metaphor of the same thing, isn't it? Just asking yourself the question, I find myself here, I didn't plan to be here. What is on offer to me in this moment? Both from people or resources or in this situation.
Totally. I think that is such a positive mindset. Necessity is the mother of invention, isn't it? There's a phrase that goes with that. So and actually there's a kind of parallel thing that is very interesting. So worldwide there's a thing called the Applied Improvisation Network. Just had their conference last week, and there are I think 5,000-6,000 practitioners who use theatre skills and improvisation to help people, do their best in these moments. And the person who was the chair of that organisation for a long time, Paul Z. Jackson, he tracks improvisation with a thing called the solutions focus, which I think is really interesting. And it's all about, so solutions focus is saying, what strengths have we got already that we could amplify? What's working that we could enhance? What assets do we have that we could use? And noticing those and seeking to, even if you said what do we have? Oh, we've only got a couple of the bits. Oh, great, you've got something then. What are we going to do with that? It's kind of can do in a way, but it's artful. And improvisation is a solutions-focused practice. Back to the stage here. If I go on stage and say, it's lovely and warm here, I'm glad we came on holiday to Benidorm, then my stage partner says, yeah, absolutely, and don't get cheaper paella anywhere. We're kind of we're beginning to create a scene, however random it might seem, and we're solutions focused. We're building and amplifying. So it just becomes a mindset, really. So you're just looking for those resources, and then I think can be interesting is your definition of what's the scrap heap challenge you're willing to take on? How big a necessity are you willing to go for? Are you going to shoot for something small or something big? Because you can go for something, back to the world of improv here, a fully staged musical with genres that you don't know, story that you don't know. That's a big shot. With a packed theatre paying £25, £30 each. That is a big, thing to go for. And I think you can track it into, what's a team willing to shoot for? If they really feel we can keep finding resources, yes-anding things, supporting each other, steering together, then hopefully you'd find, I think, that you're less often alone as a leader at the end of a series of events like that. And it might happen, but I would hope that, the more you're investing in this. So why do people take improv classes or do improv training? Because you can get better at it. It's an essential human skill, but it's one that isn't taught or worked. We don't even have the language for it.
But planning and developing that proactively then allows you in that moment to respond to it as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me personally, I'll just say that, so when I first tripped over improvisation, it's about 8-9 years ago, I was training people in creative thinking, creative problem solving, and we used yes and as how to get momentum. And I thought, well, I should go and do some improv. So I went on a 4-day retreat, as you do, signed up for the whole thing, the whole ticket, and immediately, for me, I was like, oh my goodness, I've been missing this. It's a place to express yourself and be fully supported by others, to be made to look good as an improv principle. And at the time, I was, and I still am, I can be quite shy at times. Other times I'm, quite bold and put it out there. But for me, it's taken time to learn how to actually just keep being in that present moment and actually have the courage to say a thing, to add something specific. And it applies still in life as well, but I've got more and more willing to be seen and heard. And I think it's just really valuable stuff, but I think you can't force these things. So it is an invitation, I think, to explore it and for people to find their own ways. Because actually we have these huge challenges as humankind. Our society's lots of progress, challenges galore, right? Don't even need to name them. So we are not collectively harnessing all of our resources, all of our diversity. We're not playing the best game, really. And I think a lot of it is because a lot of people are not contributing in the ways that I think they probably would like to. They're just held back, kind of in their own way. So, yeah, I do think it's a really precious kind of thing that can open that up to the degree that people are willing. Yeah. Great.
We're heading towards the end of our time together. I just want to explore, before we head towards the top tips, we always end with our top 3 tips. I just want to explore this importance of what might drive us in these unexpected moments. So when I work with clients, I talk about when you're in these volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous moments, when you're in the unexpected, it hasn't quite gone to plan, how your values are really dexterous and flexible, and they give you that movement. When there is no playbook in this moment, how do I respond? Use your values to drive you. I'm aware that when I did some improv with you it was actually, I think, in a FSB session that you were running, Federation of Small Businesses, and you said, look, we're going to try this. You did one where some principles drove the improvisation. And so I'm wondering, how do you think values or principles are important in both improvising in work, improvising in your drama, but also in these unexpected, challenging moments? How important are values and principles?
I think they're huge. Yeah, because like when you respond and you're in the moment, so you're literally responding, what's going to be the source of that? It's going to be your values, isn't it? They're your kind of deepest wiring as such, aren't they? So, yeah, I think, I often call them principles of improvisation. You could call them other things as well, but they are essentially values. So you could take yes and as a simple value that you can learn to embody and use. That's going to help you in any of those moments where you're trying to kind of like...
Because actually that phrase yes and has the value in it of collaboration, doesn't it? And building.
And inclusion, collaboration, inclusion is kind of...
so there's a mixture even in that short phrase, but that drives you, doesn't it?
It does, And Shalom Schwartz, Universal Values, really interesting map he's got of how values kind of cluster. And there are, one is around universalism, so benefiting the whole, benefiting other people. And the other one, another big one, is around self-determination, self-direction. And then there are others around like needing control or dominance, perhaps less useful value systems, certainly for our species and time that we're living in. So the values of improv really are towards that universalism and self-direction. So agency and accountability for me with my right? Am I yes? What can I say yes to? And then what do I add to that? How do I steer it? So I think that, and it ultimately, if for groups of people, it's really trying to, again, like strengthen what's already there with a few ideas like yes and, or other improv principles are dare to be obvious. Like that's, can take a bit of courage. Trust your impulses, be willing to share control, make your partner look good. Someone's always got your back. Like these are a lot of the phrases you'll hear in the world of improv and, improv training. And they all head towards supporting those kind of universal and self-direction values.
Yeah. So, what I'm picking up there is a sense of, as individuals, we contribute, but we always contribute in order to help the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so one of the phrases you use then as well is build on what's there. So for us as individuals, we might be building in the moment on our core values that we already hold.
Yep.
If we're not sure what our core values are, then maybe using some, like you've just described with improv, that sense of contribute and collaborate. Those are the two things I'm going to make sure I bring into this with the yes and.
Totally.
And so if we use those to guide us, they're almost like the little, like in the Tom and Jerry, the little angel on your shoulder saying, oh, this is really scary, but use this. What does contribute look like in this moment? What does collaborate look like in this moment? Whatever I do, I must bring that into this uncertain moment, unexpected moment, and that will guide me.
Totally. Yeah. So to try and do a worked example. So if inclusion is a really strong value for you, and you're in a work conversation, and someone says, oh, you know what, I think, and they're a really kind of bright person, they say, I think I can kind of solve this, let me go off, I'll do some spreadsheets, I'll write a report, I'll talk to some people, I'll get it all done. And you might think, well, that's good, but I want inclusion and more team and communication. So you might say yes to that. And it would be great if we support you in that. So let's not don't go off for weeks or months. Let's, whether it be, let's pull a little team together. Let's have a check-in of a kind, or, that sounds like a lot of stuff. How about we share some of that? And so you're both yesing on inclusion and then anding with potential solutions on inclusion. So it is entirely values-based. Values and intention.
Yeah, that's right. And sometimes we might name it as well, mightn't we? We might say, I recognise you can bring so much to this. And what I really want to make sure is that inclusion's at the heart of what we do. So how do we balance your ingenuity with inclusion? And you involve them in it. So that's a great example, isn't it? So it sounds to me this yes and, if our listeners are going to take anything from today, take yes and. Because that could be a great way of working to get your team high level and to get you high level in the way that you build relationship and trust with others.
Totally, I think it's a really good one to take. And I probably have been clear, but just to be absolutely sure, it's not acquiescence, it's not just agreeing, it's finding what you can value and use. That's the key bit to really get with it.
So time flies with us in the Leadership Lounge. We've done a bit of improv even than today, but we are now at the point of drawing things together with top tip. Normally we give somebody a chance for their top 3 tips, but I understand, Alex, that you might have one top tip but 3 parts.
That's
to really
correct,
nuance on that. So what's your top tip with your 3 parts for our listeners?
So there's someone I love in the world of applied improvisation called Rob Poynton. He's got a great book called Do Improvise, and he summarises improvisation as everything's an offer. So that's his phrase, everything's an offer that you can use. And I think literally the 3 parts are, like in any one time, we're always doing one of these 3 things. We're either making an offer, accepting and using an offer, or blocking an offer, inadvertently or deliberately. So I would say that would be my top tip. So can you live into this idea of everything's an offer? Explore that, like say yes to more than you might otherwise. And along the way, in every level of life, from the daily interactions to the big stuff, what offers are you making? What are you accepting and using? And also, what are you blocking and maybe not aware of? So that would be my 3-in-1 top tip.
Brilliant, lovely. Thank you, Alex, ever so much for spending time with us in the Leadership Lounge. Thanks to our listeners for joining us. We hope you've had a great time with us as well, and maybe really exploring what you could bring into your interactions with others, but also in the way that you might be leading as well. So thank you for joining us on the Leadership Lounge, and we look forward to you joining us again next month.